Hi, Medical Wildcats. I'm Joseph Guggenheim. I'm a 1972 alum of the medical school. And this month, my topic is George Streeter, for whom Streeterville, our neighborhood, is named. The man and the myth. A lot of the stories we hear about George Streeter are simply not true, and they've been disproven in recent times. This is a picture of Streeter's territory. He had the area surveyed and platted, and the map on the left shows what the map looked like in 1890. On the dotted line toward the left side of the picture is the old shoreline. The vertical line on the left is Pine Street, which later became Michigan Avenue. The shoreline is on the right. That was the eastern boundary, and the Chicago River was the southern boundary of what he was calling his district. The picture on the right shows what it looks like today, and the buildings of the Northwestern campus are in colors. So you can see that Streeterville is the home of Northwestern, and Northwestern makes up a lot of the buildings. So who was George Streeter? Well, he was the namesake for Streeterville. He was a legendary Chicago resident. He struggled, and some people think that his struggles are the struggle of oppression of wealth and power against poverty, or perhaps a capitalistic conspiracy to rob him of the land to which he was entitled, which is probably not true. But he was a very colorful character and perhaps could be the subject of a future musical comedy or comic opera. The legend of George Streeter has been largely perpetuated by this book, George Streeter the Pioneer by E.G. Ballard. However, the book is probably fiction, historical fiction. In the first place, it was written in the first person as if it's an autobiography, but the grammar is perfect, and Streeter did not speak or write with perfect grammar. It was published in 1914, 7 years before Streeter actually died. So it deletes 7 colorful years of his life. Richard Bales, who is an author and historian who has written a book on the Chicago fire, debunking many of the falsehoods. He's also an attorney for a title company, formerly of Chicago Title, has said in his 2007 article in the Tribune, everything about Streeter is a lie, even his name. That's probably referring to the fact that his fellow hobos called him captain, although he never rose above the rank of private. The tale of the boat wrecked on the sandbar was made up to justify his squatting. And this is the most popular legend about Streeter, that he wrecked his boat on a sandbar and claimed the land as his, and then started the landfill, which accounted for the 186 acres of Streeterville. Most likely false. Bale's book on Streeter has not been published yet. So let's look at what's true and what is probably just a myth. Streeter's boat ran aground on a sandbar during a storm, July 10th, 1886. Probably false, but that's the most popular legend. He repeatedly claimed his boat was stranded 450 feet from the shoreline at East Superior Street. Well, he did keep claiming this, but it was probably not true. He invited builders and contractors to dump rubble from the reconstruction following the 1871 fire to fill the lake around his boat, which was stranded on the sandbar. He probably did invite the builders, but this did not account for most of the landfill in Streeterville. The dumping was responsible for the landfill of Streeterville between Chicago Avenue and Oak Street. There is no way that this could have been filled by one man inviting contractors to dump in the period from 1886 and when he landed until 1895 when the landfill was completed. So this is a map done at the time of Streeter allegedly stranding his boat on a sandbar. The red arrow shows where the boat was and the sandbar, and you can see it's the corner of Superior and Fairbanks Court, which is where the Ward building is now. The green arrow points to where the Superior Street intersects the shoreline, and this was Nathaniel Kellogg Fairbanks' property. And that's where the name Fairbanks Court, the street on that runs through the middle of the medical center, rose. The story is that Streeter rose to the rank of captain during the Civil War, and that's been shown to be false. During the Civil War, or after the Civil War, he acquired the property where his boat landed due to the fact that he was a legitimate homesteader, Civil War veteran. This is not true. He was a squatter and had no right to the land. So much of the legend is false. Chicago History Museum published a study in their magazine in 1976, which basically repeated the classic story of Streeter getting stranded on the sandbar and claiming the land as his. But deed records, court records, and newspapers have shown that that was not true. So in 1986, they recanted their study and said that their previous study was false. I personally reviewed several articles from the New York Times, the Tribune, and the Chicago Public Library, as well as data from NOAA, and discovered that a lot of these stories about Streeter are definitely false. Let's look at Streeter's life. He was born probably in 1837 in Michigan. We don't know how many siblings he had. Some people say that he was one of 11 or perhaps 13 children. He was definitely a drifter. He had many occupations: logger, trapper, miner, salesman, vaudeville performer. And when the Civil War broke out, he enlisted and remained a private. He was never promoted to captain. After the war, he operated a traveling circus with ventriloquists, marionettes, et cetera, et cetera. But the circus got stranded in Indianapolis, so he sold it for $5,000. His first wife, whom he married in 1845, ran off with the vaudeville troupe with all their money because she was sick and tired of George. He then married 3 more times. He purchased a hotel in Iowa and operated the hotel for a while. He bought half interest in the Apollo Theater in Chicago. His third wife was Maria Mulholland, who was skillful with guns, and this was very useful when law enforcement tried to evict him from his sandbar. He began running boats on Mississippi, Tennessee, and Ohio rivers, and the legend is that he decided to be a gun runner to Central America. His wife at the time named his boat the Rutan, probably while thinking about Roatan, an island off the coast of Honduras, where they were going to take guns. The story is that Streeter wanted to test the Rutan's seaworthiness on Lake Michigan before heading to Honduras. So he sailed the Rutan on its maiden voyage on July 10th, 1886, from Milwaukee to Chicago. And he, for years, claimed that a violent storm came up near Racine, Wisconsin at approximately 10 p.m. And the Rutan lost power, drifted into a sandbar just off the coast of Chicago. Well, this is probably not true. The NOAA data, which is publicly available, shows that on July 10th, 1886, there was no storm. The following day, I guess after midnight, there was a trace of rain. The Milwaukee forecast, or the Milwaukee record, shows the same thing. There are no weather data from Racine because the weather is recorded at the airport, and there was no airport in 1886. But the articles I've seen in the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and the NOAA data all refute Streeter's story about a storm coming up. The court records, which I found in the Tribune in 1902, said that Streeter poled the Rutan to Fairbanks Pier at East Superior Street at an unknown date. We don't know if it was the night of the storm, allegedly the storm, or not. Streeter accused the contractor, Charles Fitzsimon, who was instrumental in the landfill, of driving piles into the lake bed to prevent Streeter from relaunching the Rutan. Fitzsimons told Streeter to leave, but he stayed. And the story is that Fairbank told Streeter he could stay until his boat was repaired. I question this because if he told, it's unusual that he would tell Fairbanks he told Streeter he could stay when he spent the next 20 years trying to evict him. Fitzsimons testified that a storm blew Rutan onto its side while docked at the pier one evening, but the date was not specified. This is the first house erected in Streeterville between Walton and Delaware Streets in what is now the south end of the Gold Coast area. It was allegedly built in 2 hours and 10 minutes. Streeter had the area surveyed and platted, and that was the map I showed in the second slide. Streeter claimed he had 186 acres of his land, which he called the District of Lake Michigan. He claimed the land was a sovereign area, subject only to the laws of the United States because it was not on the map of Illinois or Chicago. Streeter produced a fake document for years in court saying that he was the rightful owner of this property. It was given to him by President Grover Cleveland. Forensic analysis in 1918 said that the deed was actually from President Van Buren for Robert Kinsey, a prominent early Chicagoan. Streeter invited trash dumping around the Route Hanford landfill, and he collected scrap metal and coins from the trash. He sold approximately 200 lots of the property to unsuspected buyers and pocketed the taxes. This property actually rightfully belonged to Nathaniel Fairbank. Potter Palmer, the retailer who started Marshall Field and Company, William Ogden, the first mayor of Chicago, and the Farwell family. Farwell was a senator from Illinois, and also the Owners Association, Pine Street Land Association, and Chicago Title and Trust. The Streeter collected property taxes for this land that he never owned, and sold snacks and alcoholic beverages, including on Sunday when it was unlawful. He had many encounters with law enforcement and many episodes of violence. He once used a jar of raspberry jelly to assault a man during an argument. The wealthy residents of the Gold Coast wanted to eliminate him because of the odor and pollution and obstructing their view. And they tried for over 20 years before they were finally successful. Many attempts were met with gunfire from Mr. and Mrs. Streeter. In 1893, the police removed Streeter, but he came back. He was captured by the police, but escaped in 1899 when his wife at the time poured a pot of boiling water on his captors. The police ordered Streeter to disperse, but he said he could not do it because he could not disperse because he was alone. In 1901, Streeter returned to his so-called district and found an area that had been fenced off. So he and his wife camped out in a wagon on East Chestnut Street near the current Ritz-Carlton Hotel. The police pulled down his shanty in 1902. In 1904, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, but he was released after only 9 months. He was convicted of manslaughter and served time in the Joliet prison. Finally, in 1918, law enforcement seized his arsenal, threw away his possessions, burned down his house, but his wife fought them off with a meat cleaver unsuccessfully. In 1918, he was charged with assaulting a police officer and selling liquor without a license. In 1918, Chicago Title and Trust finally permanently evicted the Streeters. And law enforcement had trouble making any charges stick because some of the charges were dropped because law enforcement had no jurisdiction in his so-called district. And Streeter said he was acting in self-defense sometimes. Sometimes he said he was not using deadly force, only using buckshot. But the Battle of Garbage Hill was finally over. So how did the shoreline evolve? The legend is that Streeter invited builders to dump rubble around the stranded boat on the sandbar, and this would move the shoreline eastward and create more land. The book that I cited earlier said that, to quote Streeter, he received millions of loads of refuse and earth of which to fill the territory about my island home. But the landfill was completed in 1895. Streeter's boat arrived in 1886. So to receive just 1 million loads would mean that he received 13 loads every hour, 24/7, in the 3,281 days from July 1886 to December 1895, which was impossible. So how are the shorelines formed? Well, shorelines are formed by the net result of erosion, removing land, and accretion, which is the accumulation of solid land. In about 1834, the federal government built a pier 1,500 feet into the lake at the Chicago River to increase the accretion. And you can see in this contour map, in the upper left, the vertical line says shoreline, and then you can see the contour lines as the shoreline marches eastward, 1821, 1833, 1837, 39, 45, 51, and 64. So just the natural accretion is increasing the shoreline. The final contour is 1864, 7 years before the Chicago fire. So this is just a natural accretion. And you can see the sandbar on the far right side of the picture also increasing. But the residents in this area wanted to stimulate the accretion and the building up of the land. And these included Senator John Farwell, Fairbank, executors of Walter Newberry's estate. They built breakwaters and piers, and these are the straight black lines to the right of the red line. The red line is the shoreline. And you can see the tan area is where the bottom of the lake is filling this area to increase the shoreline. So a lot of the increase in the shoreline was done by private citizens, and well before the arrival of Streeter. So Streeter, remember, did not arrive until 1886. The fire was 1871, but beginning before the fire in 1868, there was a German immigrant, Tobias Almendinger, and a contractor, Charles Fitzsimon, who bought land east of Pine Street, which later became Michigan Avenue, between Walton and East Pearson. And this is the area, roughly the black rectangle in the middle of your picture. And they also drove piles into the lake bottom, which are represented by the black circles. This was done to increase the accretion in this area and to retain any dumping that might occur. But the dumping did not begin until after the fire. In 1921, George Streeter died. His widow, Ma Streeter, nieces and nephews, filed suit against the Chicago Title Company and wealthy property owners in the Streeterville and Gold Coast areas for $1 billion. But the federal judge, James Wilkerson, threw the case out because he ruled that Ma Streeter's marriage to George was illegal because he had never legally divorced his first wife, the one that ran off with the vaudeville troupe. So the case was dismissed. But the family continued to try. His family continued attempts to sue the property owners in the area until at least 1937, and the case may still be open. The defendants in this case included Northwestern University McKinlock Campus, which is now called the McGaw Medical Center, and Passavant Hospital, which is now part of Northwestern Memorial. You can see the picture from his funeral on the right, and on the cephalad end of the casket, you can see his famous top hat. So what do we know that's true, and what do we know that's a myth about George Streeter? Well, we know for a fact that he ran aground with his boat in 1866. We do not know whether he did it on the sandbar or whether he actually did it on the shoreline. We do not know if it was intentional or accidental. We do know, however, that one man, George Streeter, could not have accounted for the 186 acres of Streeterville in the 9 years he lived there as a squatter. We do know that he was not a landowner, that he was purely a squatter in this period. The landfill, 186 acres, was the result of a combined effort of organizations and individuals beginning in the 1830s and continue until the mid-1890s. In this picture, you can see the Streeterville. This is the area you see in the picture, except for the Navy Pier and the water treatment plant in the background. So let's get together again virtually next month. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay connected with each other, and I look forward to our virtual meeting then.